Thank you all for coming today. My name is Administrator Karen Owens, and I'll be emceeing today's press conference. We have five speakers today. City of Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia, Los Angeles County Supervisor Mark Ridley-Thomas will be joining us shortly, Chief of Police Jim McDonald, Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Homeland Security Investigations Deputy Special Agent in Charge Mark Selby, and Pastor Gregory Sanders, who is the President of the Long Beach Ministers Alliance. Due to the number of speakers that we have today, we'd like to ask you to please hold your questions until everyone is finished. I'd now like to introduce Mayor Robert Garcia.
Well, good afternoon, and I want to thank, obviously, everyone for coming here, and I especially want to thank all the folks that are here behind us, particularly law enforcement, who are always working every day to ensure that our communities are safe. We're here today to make an important announcement, and that is the successful outcome of the Long Beach Police Department's Human Trafficking Work and Task Force over the last year. We've had an aggressive way of addressing human trafficking in the city of Long Beach. It's been a comprehensive approach, and we couldn't be more proud of the results, and we're really looking forward to the continuing work of all the agencies working together. As we all know, human trafficking is appalling and is a terrible crime that's committed throughout the county and also here in the city of Long Beach. It is the second largest international crime industry behind illegal drugs and generates approximately, in the billions of dollars, $32 billion each year on human trafficking alone. In 2013, the Long Beach Police Department's Vice Investigations Section filed more human trafficking cases than any other agency in the entire county, putting Long Beach at the forefront of working on this important issue to save those people that are on the streets suffering every single day. So this department, through our vice work, through the partnerships and the agencies, have filed more cases than any other agency in the entire county. This city council in the city of Long Beach has put human trafficking as a top priority as part of our public safety mix. We know and understand that's a terrible tragedy, and we put the funds aside through our budgets to ensure that funding remains in place. As a result of this effort, we have rescued 22 girls from forced human trafficking and prostitution, and an additional 54 women that have been referred to other nonprofit organizations for assistance and help. I'm also pleased to announce that in this year's budget, the City Council put additional funds aside as well to continue to combat human trafficking and to go after the perpetrators and the criminals that are out there trying to put these women and forcing these women in many cases to do these horrible things and into slavery. Human trafficking is a top priority of the city, of the police department, and of all of our partner agencies. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Chief of Police, who has headed up all these efforts, Chief Jim McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia, and thank you all for joining us today. First, I'd like to say that I'm proud of all the hardworking men and women who contributed to this human trafficking task force, many who are behind me today. Without their perseverance and passionate drive for ending human sex trafficking, the results I'm going to share with you today would not have been possible. I'd also like to thank the Mayor and the City Council for recognizing the importance and the need to take on these callous sex offenders with full force. For years, our vice detectives arrested prostitutes after complaints were received regarding their activity. The investigative interviews focused primarily on the actions that led to their arrest and not on the path that got them there. In 2012, new legislation brought the topic of human sex trafficking to light, and Long Beach PD vice detectives realized they had to change the way they looked at females suspected of prostitution. After the implementation of the new legislation, each female suspect was viewed as a potential victim, and detectives became aware of an increasing number of females who had been forced into prostitution. And I say females throughout this because overwhelming the number is, we're dealing with our female, but there are some males involved in this as well. This created a dramatic shift in the way detectives began handling their investigation. They saw this as an opportunity to incarcerate human traffickers with increased prison sentence and provide assistance to the victims. The task force was implemented in February of this year, and the department partnered with multiple agencies with the goal of impacting human trafficking through the identification and rescue of commercially sexually exploited children and adult victims, providing victim services through community-based nonprofit organizations, and the identification, arrest, and conviction of the persons profiting from this horrendous crime and those who use the services of sexually exploited minors. The Vice Investigations Detail developed a plan of action. They provided training and education to other specialized detectives throughout the department to be able to create a force multiplier effect. This cadre of experienced investigators assisted in several multi-agency human trafficking operations. In an effort to increase public awareness, they conducted presentations to several community groups such as PTAs, churches, and neighborhood associations. In addition, an informational brochure was created to help educate the community regarding human trafficking, and we have copies available here today for you. They collaborated with multiple victim advocacy groups to assist with victim resources. This component was critical in helping to provide victims with immediate as well as long-term assistance. As of today, the task force operation culminated in a total of 91 arrests, which are broken down as follows: 20 human trafficking arrests, 8 pimping arrests, 24 assisting a prostitute arrests, and 29 John program arrests. We also had 10 arrests for Internet Crimes Against Children, ICAC, that program, which are predators that try and meet young girls on the internet, and then when they come to meet them, they're arrested. For clarification overall, human trafficking is when a suspect forces or coerces an adult into prostitution, or any time a minor is the victim. Pimping is when a suspect profits from the actions of a prostitute. Force or coercion is not necessary. A minor is automatically considered a victim of human trafficking. Assisting a prostitute, when a suspect is arrested for assisting a prostitute when he or she monitors, protects, drives, or manages the prostitute. So basically somebody there facilitating. John arrests, and that's obviously when a suspect solicits a prostitute. Other notable statistics include 22 minors between the ages of 12 and 17 were rescued, and 54 women were referred to victim resources and support services. Here are some additional facts that I'd like to be able to share with you too. As the mayor stated, in 2013, our Vice Investigations section filed more human trafficking cases than any other agency in Los Angeles County, and we're on track to achieve this distinction for a second year in a row, and something that unfortunately is a distinction that we would rather not have. And what we find is the more we look, the more we find, and I think that jurisdictions throughout the area and across the country would find the same. These investigations begin when detectives identify potential victims, who then lead them to the suspects. Over 60% of the suspects arrested for human trafficking related offenses are documented gang members. Many cases where documented gang members were involved resulted in successful gang enhancements also being filed. Several commercially sexually exploited children were runaways from as far away as Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, and New York, and we were able to reunite many of them with their families. Several women who chose to accept services have successfully completed the programs and are no longer being exploited. We assisted numerous victims with residence relocations as well as tattoo removal. We assisted a woman from China in returning home after she came to the United States believing that she was going to be employed in a legitimate business, but was forced into prostitution instead. We participated in the recent development of the Law Enforcement First Responder Protocol for commercially sexually exploited children, which provides standardized guidelines for the care of minor victims. In our partnership with LAPD and their Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, the 10 arrests that were made were of men who had arranged to meet who they believed was a minor for sex. In one of the cases, the suspect arranged to have sex with 2 children under 10 years of age. After he was arrested, detectives searched the trunk of his vehicle and found a large roll of carpeting, several rolls of duct tape, handcuffs, and a magazine loaded with bullets. You can imagine what his intent was. Many of the cases that were generated as a result of the task force are still under investigation, so we're not really allowed to be able to talk to those in any greater detail today. However, I'd like to give you an example of the type of sentencing we have being handed down in these types of cases. Last week, a 23-year-old LeBrette Wynn was sentenced to over 47 years in state prison for numerous human trafficking and sexual assault-related charges on a 2013 Long Beach police investigation. In this case, in addition to repeatedly sexually assaulting one of the victims, the the defendant had his pimp moniker and a dollar sign tattooed on her face as punishment for wanting to go home. The co-defendant in this case, 25-year-old Eric Avery, is scheduled for his sentencing on October 17th. We're currently working on a human trafficking case involving a minor and are asking for the public's help. On September 15, 2014, Vice detectives came into contact with a 16-year-old runaway and learned that she was involved in acts of prostitution. Through our investigation, we learned that 2 male suspects were assisting her in these acts. One of the suspects, using a fictitious name, rented a motel room and purchased clothing from a retail store that the minor could use while performing acts of prostitution. Video footage of the victim and the suspects were captured on the store's surveillance cameras. Also shown in the video is the vehicle the suspect used to transport the minor to the motel, which appears to be a newer white 4-door sedan. The victim was placed in the care of the Department of Children and Family Services. We're hoping that someone will recognize the suspects in the video and come forward. On the display board is a still photo taken from that video, and we'll be making the photo and the video footage available to you through our website. I'd like to thank the following agencies and community-based nonprofit organizations who partnered with us to make the efforts of the task force successful. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, their Homeland Security investigations, represented here today by Deputy Special Agent in Charge Mark Selby. The Los Angeles Police Department's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, represented by Captain 2 Fabian Lizarraga. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Compton Station, represented by Commander Stephen Smith and Captain Merle Ladenheim. Los Angeles County Probation Department, represented by Joan Pera, Supervisor of the Child Trafficking Unit. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, represented here by Janice Johnson and Jane Creighton. The Long Beach City Prosecutor's Office, represented by City Prosecutor Doug Howard. The Department of Children and Family Services, represented by Xiomara Flores-Holguin. The Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, also known as CAST LA, represented by Executive Director Kay Buck. And the Mary Magdalene Project, represented by Executive Director Dr. Stephanie Powell. And also Saving Innocence, represented by Founder and Director Kim Biddle and Crisis Response Coordinator Jasmine Edwards. And from the Long Beach Ministers Alliance, Pastor Gregory Sanders and Bishop Todd Irvin. Also joined here today by Long Beach Councilmember Lena Gonzalez from the 1st District. Thank you also for your support. I'd now like to kick it over to invite HSI Deputy Special Agent in Charge Mark Selby to speak. Let me ask Mark just to wait a second, and if I could, we're very fortunate in this county to have members of the Board of Supervisors who have been so supportive and passionate about this cause. Our own Supervisor Don Kanabi, who is one of the members leading the effort, is not able to be here today due to scheduling issues, but we're very thankful to have another solid leader on the board, Supervisor Mark Ridley-Thomas, who has joined us today. And through their advocacy and public education campaign, we're trying to get the word out there to be able to have people come forward and be able to help us identify cases where this is happening. So, Supervisor, if you would.
Thank you very much, Chief McDonald. I'm delighted to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, I did think I was Don Kanabi, but obviously I'm not. But use your imagination. Mr. Mayor, delighted to be here to join you on this occasion and to just simply say that Long Beach has it going on, and we're delighted to celebrate the fact that you know what it means to be a role model in law enforcement. We give our acknowledgement to this police department for doing the work that it does. This department, under the leadership of its chief, has distinguished itself in combating sex trafficking, and we in Los Angeles County acknowledge that as a partner in the effort to make it abundantly clear that there are few things that are more disturbing than the buying and selling of children for sex. Unfortunately, our society has gotten it twisted. They are misinformed about the issue, and all of us are here today to try to send a strong word to educate those who need to be educated And to those who need to be incarcerated, we want a message to be sent to you as well. Our children are not for sale. And we don't wish to refer to them as prostitutes. We refer to them as victims. We don't want to perpetuate modern day slavery. We want to deal with this issue straight on, and that's why we are here. My colleague, Supervisor Kanabe, and I have worked very hard, along with the other members of the board, to push for tougher legislation to penalize traffickers and buyers. And locally, the county has increased its victim services. That's what we need to do. We need to do both. We need to drop the hammer on those who violate the law and support those who are victimized by those predators. Much more needs to be done, as you will hear more about, no doubt, today. But may I reinforce the point that these are indeed victims, not prostitutes. Young women and girls are getting bought and sold in Los Angeles County and parts of Los Angeles County, Antelope Valley, other parts of the state, as well, Orange County and San Diego. But right here in Long Beach, we are standing up to say that enough is enough, and we are not going to tolerate this anymore, but we are going to put all of our resources together creatively, efficiently, and appropriately in the confines of the law to make sure that we do what needs to be done to make sure our communities are safe and that our children are protected from predators. That is the message that we have from the religious community, from the business community, from nonprofit organizations, from advocates who know the business intimately and have stood up very hard for a long time, and they are educating us as to what can and should be done in this regard. So this is a huge issue. It's a big challenge that we face, and yet we are here to say that we won't back up. We want to send a message to the governor. You have a couple of pieces of legislation on your desk here and now. May I say, Mr. Governor, there's a county co-sponsored piece of legislation by Senator Block, SB 473. Mr. Governor, sign the bill. There's a county sponsored piece of legislation, SB 955. By Senator Mitchell. Mr. Governor, signed the bill. And finally, another one co-authored by Lou Hill and Mitchell, SB 1388. They all are in the area specifically clamping down on human sex trafficking. If we do these things, get these bills signed, we will in fact have a better shot at ridding our communities of this awful, awful set of circumstances, and set an example for other communities across the nation and indeed the world. Long Beach is a leader. We're delighted to be here and joining in this effort today. Thank you, and God bless you.
Let me invite to the podium now from the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, Mark Selby. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief McDonald. First, I want to applaud the men and women of Long Beach Police Department for the great work they've done as part of this ongoing joint effort to combat human trafficking in this area. I also want to express our gratitude to members of the Long Beach City Council for their vision and support, because without that, none of this would have been possible. The successes that have been discussed wouldn't have been possible. This police chief and this city council recognize that human trafficking is a growing problem. A particular concern is the increasing incidence of domestic sex trafficking, often involving young men and women lured into prostitution by so-called Romeo pimps. These traffickers are surfing social media sites and even recruiting in area high schools and middle schools, searching for the next prospective victim. The hardships and brutality these sex trafficking victims endure are chilling. Among the victims rescued as a result of our enforcement efforts was a 29-year-old woman who had been sex trafficked for nearly a decade. During that time, she was sold from pimp to pimp and forced to prostitute herself across the United States. The woman recounted to our investigators how she had been subjected to frequent beatings, including one that was so severe it left her temporarily blinded. She was branded with tattoos identifying her as the property of traffickers, not unlike the way ranchers brand their cattle. At the time of her rescue, she told our agents if we hadn't found her, she would probably be dead somewhere. Following her rescue, HSI's victim witness coordinator worked with a woman to get her support services she desperately needed. Today, the former victim is continuing to receive mental health therapy and is even applying for jobs and for college. Scenarios like this underscore why our joint efforts to combat human trafficking are so vitally important. While addressing the needs of human trafficking victims is a priority, so too is seeking justice against those who commit these heinous crimes. In the last 12 months, HSI special agents in the greater Los Angeles area have made nearly 200 arrests in connection with human trafficking cases. During that same time frame, our special agents have secured more than 100 criminal convictions involving defendants charged with trafficking violations. As a result of our close working relationship with the Long Beach Police Department and other federal and local law enforcement agencies, we anticipate that these arrest and convictions stats are going to continue to climb. Partnerships like the one we enjoy with our enforcement counterparts here in Long Beach are instrumental to those ongoing efforts. Over the last 8 months together, we've made important strides to address the problem, but I want to emphasize that our joint efforts are still very much ongoing. Tragically, we believe still that there are many human trafficking victims that go undetected because the victims are afraid to come forward. All of us here today want trafficking victims to know that help is available if you just come forward. We're committed to seeing that you get the services and support that you need. And to those who are perpetrating these reprehensible crimes, we have a message for you all. Your callous disregard for human dignity drives and motivates us. And we will do everything in our power to find you and hold you accountable for the lives that you destroyed. I'd now like to invite Pastor Gregory Sanders from the Long Beach Ministries Alliance to make a few comments.
Hello. The Long Beach Ministers Alliance, and I'm glad Bishop Irvin is with me, and a couple of the other pastors could not be here, but we've had continuous conversations with the Long Beach Police Department regarding the effects of human trafficking in Long Beach. It's paramount here. And one of our many talking points is centered on the impact and influence of human trafficking, particularly on our young men and women of color. We're seeing a rise. And the timing of today's events actually overlaps a citywide effort by our clergy in our city to ignite awareness to the growing challenge of local trafficking. It's a matter that has implications from our nail salons to the streets. And so we're observing an increase in the amount of African American women being forced to participate in online and offline behavioral compromise. And according to a recent report by our California Attorney General, Kamala Harris, 72% of human trafficking victims' countries of origins was actually identified by a California task force as American. So that means that the public perception is that human trafficking victims are always from other countries. And this data, though, reflects that that's not the case, that many of them are right here in California. So that means that there are sons, there are daughters, there are neighbors, and it means that that we're not that far removed from it, because it could be our nieces and our nephews and our children. So it's closer than what we think. So we have committed that the church, the community, the police, legal entities, we have to be tethered. We have to be tethered together with not just commitment, but compassion, and to decipher this problematic area and behavior of conduct. So we would like to take take the circumstances of today and like to transform them into something much greater. And we believe we can do that through better education, continued conversations, awareness, and prevention. I want to commend our chief and deputy chiefs that they really do bring clergy to the table, because they understand that we are partnered as pastors, public, and police in preventing these various situations. So thank you very much, Chief and Deputy Chief. Great job.
Thank you very much, Pastor Sanders. I'd also like to acknowledge we're joined today by Ms. Naomi Rainey from the Long Beach branch of the NAACP, who's also a great partner in trying to make this community even safer for all of us. Let me open it up. Any questions anybody has, we'll take them.
Chief, I think is actually maybe even the mayor's stats, but can you just kind of repeat the stat packages that you've given today, what the time frame for those were?
Yeah, February, we began this.
And that's the rescues as well that,
Right.
that Mayor Garcia noted? Okay.
Right,
When was the unit established?
February.
And then when were the people rescued? Was it in February
In that period of time from February to now.
to now?
Right.
And I believe you mentioned 200 arrests and 100 convictions
That
within that time span, or how many, what?
That's for our fiscal year for HSI. So in addition to what we've done as part of this task force, we also pursue them individually as an agency.
And when, from when to when?
That would be fiscal year, so it would be
12 months?
Right, correct.
Chief, can you describe this Romeo pimps or
Sure.
something like that? Can you give me a little?
Yeah, the term Romeo pimp was thrown out there. That's one form where pimps basically will get on the internet and sweet talk somebody, generally young girls, tell them they love them, and many of these girls have come from circumstances where they're looking for validation, they're looking to be loved. They've come from, in too many cases, childhoods where they've been abused since a very early age. We find many that run away from foster care, many that run away from other places, as you heard, around the country, and they've got somebody telling them that they're in good hands, they're going to take care of them. Come out, if they're from far away, come out to Los Angeles and I'll be your boyfriend type of thing. And they do, they fall for that. And then they get here, and then what the procedure that happens is fairly predictable. They'll be raped, and then they'll be put into a circumstance where they can't leave, and they'll be forced into ultimately slavery.
So what happens to the assets? These people are obviously making money.
A lot of money.
How is that going to be tracked, or how is that being tracked?
Right. When we talk and we debrief these, what we found is that the pimps generally like to get about 5 girls working for them. If they can do that, the money they can generate, and they force these girls to bring in $600 or $700 a day, 7 days a week. So the money at the end of the year for having 5 girls under your control, anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000. And it's a product unlike narcotics, which many of the gangs have been involved in previously, which you sell once. They're selling, unfortunately, these young women and girls over and over again, and ruining lives.
Can you talk about the makeup of the task force and kind of how the task force is attacking things differently than prior to its inception?
Yeah, it's basically good, solid police work. It's bringing multiple agencies together, law enforcement agencies, community-based organizations, county resources, particularly Department of Children and Family Services, and really, I listed a number of them. Any resource that can play a role, we invite in. Many are already focused on this, and it's really, instead of dealing with it in silos, it's trying to bring us all together, focused on saving young people's lives and holding people accountable for who are doing the things that I mentioned earlier. So while this is a task force configuration, it's not something that has a limited duration. We continue to move forward. We continue to try and find new and innovative ways to use the resources we have to, like I mentioned, continue the rescues and continue to hold those accountable who are doing this. We also intend, as we move forward, to continue to look at exposing Johns, who are the customers for these